Hello and welcome to today's Coach Chat. I know we have several new viewers today, so I want to start off by just going through and talking a little bit about how this Coach Chat works in case you're joining us for the first time today. So if you look on your screen, you should see the live stream Coach Chat. That's me talking right now, but if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see this section where it asks you to enter your name. And that section is going to be where you would ask any potential questions that you have during this Coach Chat. And then below that, when this page is not a live stream, when it's just the calendar showing you when the next Coach Chat is, there's also a section to ask questions, and those get forwarded to my email since I'm not live. So I was absolutely bombarded with questions this week, which is great. I love getting questions from you guys. So I'm just going to start today by working through those. But as we go, if you have questions about anything I'm talking about or anything running related at all, feel free to go ahead and log in with your name, and then you will see the chat section where you can enter your question and upload it. All right, so the first question we got was from someone who is running the Marine Corps Marathon coming up. So their question was this: my first marathon is in 2 weeks. I'll be racing the Marine Corps Marathon with some 40,000 other runners. Usually at races, I take a short, easy run before getting in the corral or lineup, but with a race this big, I'm thinking that this may not be an option. What do you suggest for keeping muscles warm and loose during the long start wait? That's a great question. So ideally, if you were at a marathon and you had no restrictions on where you're supposed to be or any time limitations, your perfect warm-up for a marathon would be about 15 minutes of easy jogging, about 35 to 45 minutes before the race. You'll see a lot of the elite runners doing that as well. They'll have access to a special warm-up area. They'll be doing about a 15-minute jog, and then after that, a few drills, just general things to loosen up your range of motion, some high knees, some butt kicks, swinging the legs back and forth. But for those of you who are in, you need to be in your corral for a long time before the start, and there's really not a lot of room to move around. That can definitely be a problem in the way of warming up. So my suggestion is this: when you warm up, a little bit of science behind it suggests that warming up your legs with a run like that, those effects can last for about 45 minutes. So even if you have to warm up an hour before the race, that's better than no warm up at all. If you have to jog for 15 minutes, an hour out, that's better than no warm up at all. But I think one of the most important things you can do is to keep, especially if it's going to be a cooler day. I'm not sure what the weather is going to be for Marine Corps, but for instance, a race like Chicago this past weekend, if it's going to be a cooler start around 50 degrees or lower, then you want to make sure that you have on right up for as long as you can, that you have on layers. You have on sweatpants, most importantly, and also a jacket. Now, I know it's not as good as running around, but if you have to, don't feel silly if you feel the need to, if you're stuck in your corral, you need to move a little bit in place. Feel free to jog a little bit, shake your legs out. It's really important that your body is warmed up heading into a race. A lot of people think that a marathon is one of those races you don't need to warm up for, and indeed, some people do choose to view the first few miles of a marathon as a warm-up. But if you are racing a marathon, if you're racing it to run it as hard as you possibly can to finish from point A to point B, it is important that you have a proper warm-up. You'll even see the elite runners doing strides before they start the marathon. About 10 minutes before the race, they will jump out and they will start doing these long 100-meter accelerations to warm things up. All right, so it looks like we've already got a couple of questions here. All right, so this one is 52-year-old female, finally sorted my stability and strength issues. Can I get faster from here, or is that it? Prior to rehab, I was stuck at about a 2:15 half marathon. I get this question all the time, especially from people who are 40 to 45 and older. A lot of runners, they come to me and they say, am I done getting faster? Is my age a real factor in terms of my performance? Well, you have your age, your genetic age, and then you have something that a lot of coaches refer to as running age. Running age is the concept that from the time that you start seriously training, whether that's when you're 20 or whether that's when you're 45, from that point, you should have about 10 to 14 years until you see your best races. So your best time should be within about a decade to 15 years of starting seriously training. So if you started seriously training when you were 40, you should be seeing your best times when you're between 50 and 55. Now, obviously, the higher up you get, the less chance that this will happen. Meaning, if you start running when you're 70, an 85-year-old is not going to be able to keep up with the physical demands. But this goes within reason, and I think that it's really nice to look ahead and see. I coach a guy who is 65 years old, and he broke 3 hours in the marathon for the first time last year. And so you can definitely be running your fastest all the way up into your 60s. But then that kind of leaves the question of, okay, well, what if my fastest days, I had been training since I was 20 and now I'm 50? Yes, your fastest days may be behind you. But that's why it's great to see the age-graded calculator, to be able to compare yourself against younger runners and to see where your ability lines up. For instance, that 65-year-old guy that broke 3 hours in the marathon, he's run 2:57. That is equivalent to an elite 20-year-old runner running 2:18 in the marathon. So it's a great way to really see truly what your fitness is at on an age-graded scale, not just you versus the younger you of 25 years ago. But yeah, my answer to this woman who's 52-year-old and female, I would have a few questions for her. Namely, when did you start running? Because then she said, well, I started running when I was 45, I'd say, okay, well, you should see your fastest days should still be ahead of you. And then also, she said, I finally sorted through my strength and stability issues. Can I get faster from here, or is that it? Yes, strength and stability are not all that it takes to get faster. There's a really big concept that I am a believer of, which is speed through strength, meaning adding mileage, adding just time on your feet, out the door, easy running, adding that up over time. It makes your body more efficient, and it does make you faster. So I believe that adding a bit of mileage to your program, tweaking things up a little bit, changing speed workouts, maybe a new coach if you've started to feel stale. All of these things can contribute to you getting faster. So take full advantage of every aspect of your training if you're really looking to make that jump to the next level. Okay, so the next question we have is, how important is it to run slow in your long runs? From reading articles on the half marathon training, I should be running around 10 minutes a mile, but my body automatically runs at 9:15 to 9:30. Is this too fast? I am aiming for a half marathon time of 1:50. So let's just put this in perspective here. A 1:50 half marathon, that is 8:23 mile pace. So this person is saying, okay, I'm shooting for a goal of 8:23 for my half marathon. Is 9:15 too fast for me to be running on my easy days? And my very simple answer to that would be yes, it's absolutely too fast for you to be running on your easy days if you are racing a half marathon all out. Ideally, you should see a span of greater than 2 minutes. And for some athletes, it's much more than that in terms of their half marathon pace and their easy pace. I'll use myself as an example. My half marathon pace is right around 5:30 per mile. And my easy days are oftentimes right around 9 minutes a mile. So I'm running the same easy pace as this person, which leads me to believe that they're truly not running easy enough. So it's not a hard and fast mathematical equation that tells you, hey, here's your half marathon pace, here's your easy pace, be exactly right within that window, because it definitely takes time to truly understand what it means for your body to run easy. Looks like we have a comment here from Mike. Mike says, hi, Sarah, big congratulations on your 3rd American placing in Chicago. Thank you, Mike. I was watching the splits, exciting stuff. All times seem to be down on last year except yours. Was it a bit windy or hot later in the race? For those of you watching who have run Chicago, you will definitely understand that Chicago was warmer and windier than it was last year, absolutely. But for me, a big issue within the Chicago race, I did run within 7 seconds. I ran 2:32.51 this year, which is 7 seconds slower than I ran last year. And for me, the biggest factor was that this year they eliminated having male pacers for female elite athletes in the race. So having to do all of the thinking myself, not having a group of guys to run with, that really was a challenge. And I found my mile splits to be have a lot more variance than they did the year before. But thank you, Mike. I appreciate the kind words. We have a comment. Yeah, Deborah also says, she says, I was an hour after Sarah, and yes, it was windy and got quite warm. Had to stop and drink a full cup of Gatorade 2 times towards the end. I would also say this, big congrats to Deborah, who just posted she won her age group at the Chicago Marathon. And Deborah, you're going to hate me. I'm going to share your age. She is 59, which means she is at the top of her age group of 55 to 59, and she won her age group with a 3:33 marathon. It was incredible, especially on a day with conditions like that. So back to running slow on your slow runs, especially on your long runs. If your long run is not marathon specific, meaning your coach hasn't assigned you a specific workout to do within your long run, unless it is otherwise stated, your long run should be taken very easily, meaning as easy as your easy days. Not necessarily slower than that, but it should be taken to be at the same pace or the same effort as running easy on your easy days. Okay, so this leads us actually right into the next question, which is just a question about easy days. What's the best way to work out your pace to run easy? Also, any tips for keeping to a slow pace? Thanks. So we'll just talk about kind of generally, but just one more thing to add about this person whose goal half marathon time is 8:23. They say their body tends to automatically settle into a 9:15 to 9:30 pace range. My suggestion for this is that your body has, and every runner is different. It's kind of like your own runner's footprint. You have your own gears and how certain gears will feel sticky while other gears will not. For instance, for me, running a 6-minute pace feels very, very uncomfortable. I feel like I'm straining, I'm pushing, my form doesn't feel efficient. But once I cut down to marathon pace, just maybe 10 or 11 seconds a mile faster, I suddenly feel fluid and efficient again. So it may be that 9:15 to 9:30 is one of those gears where your body just seems to lock in and go. But I would suggest that you maybe need to step out of your comfort zone in slowing down for your half marathon or for your training. Because if you are able to do that, if you're able to pull back and start running 10-minute miles on your easy days, all of a sudden you will see your speed days start to speed up quite a bit because your body is adequately recovered to hit that speed work. For me, I know that I tend to have a really, really wide range, but I will see 5 minutes between my fastest fast days and my slowest slow days. So like my easy days, 10-minute pace, my fast days, 5-minute pace on a good day. If I'm having a workout, I will see 5 minutes worth of variance. I'm not necessarily suggesting that is for everyone, but I would say 2 to 3 minutes is pretty common. And in this case, 45 seconds is not nearly enough. You need to be slowing down on your easy days. So to answer this next question about easy days, what's the best way to work out your pace to run easy? There's several tips and tricks that I could give you for keeping your runs easy enough. But I think that one of the best things you can do is to, and I'm assuming that this person, because 90% of the athletes that I coach do, but I'm assuming that this person uses a GPS watch when they run. My best suggestion for this, and if you really actually want to listen to your body and run as slow as it actually wants you to, leave the watch at home. Go onto Google Maps or choose a route that you already know. Figure out the mileage you want. If your coach gives you 8 miles for that day, pick out an 8-mile route and leave the watch at home and run that 8 miles without a watch. And during that time, pay attention to your breathing. Don't listen to any music. Just pay attention to how your body feels. You should be able to say the trick that I always like to share is that you should be able to say the Pledge of Allegiance without gasping for breath as you're running. So if you're finding that you're not able to speak conversationally and that you're having a tough time breathing, if you can't say the Pledge of Allegiance, if you're gasping every 2 words, then maybe you are running a little bit too hard or a lot too hard. So really, truly listen to your body. I'm a believer that your body will tell you what pace it needs to run. And that can be all over the place. I know that on Runners Connect, we give you a pace range for your easy days, but I will never be upset when an athlete comes to me after an easy day and says, my body was really tired and I took it a minute per mile slower than my range. That is fine with me. If you're listening to your body, that's absolutely 100% okay. And that should be because once your hard days are getting harder, you're breaking down your muscles and you're pushing more than you were able to before. And for that reason, you're more sore on the following few days. And so that way your runs are going to need to slow down. And it's absolutely one of those things that it takes you being able to drop your pride and say, I don't care if I get passed by everyone and their mother today. It doesn't bother me. I'm out here to run slow because I know that is in turn going to make me faster. I always like to compare it to a staircase. If you look at the way that stairs work, you're building up, building up, building up with this intense grade, and then you are leveling out. For people who try and charge up a 45-degree angle slope or even a more intense slope if they're running harder on their easy days, you have no respite from that hard work. You're just continually going up, up, up until you crash. Whereas stair step, you're building with hard workouts and you are plateauing with easy running. Building, plateauing, and you can climb so much farther that way. All right, so the next question we have is, Okay, this is a good one. And I get this a lot about hill repeats, especially for people who live in hilly areas. But this person says, I may want to include hill repeats in my next training block. What are the benefits of hill repeats? What grade and distance for a hill? What pace for the workout? How many repeats per workout? And how frequently should a hill repeat workout be done? Okay, this is about 7 or 8 questions here. So I'm going to tackle these one at a time. All right, so they say, what are the benefits of hill repeats? Hill repeats have several benefits, but to me, the 2 biggest benefits are the increases that it makes in your explosivity as an athlete, and also the increase in your efficiency of form. When you run up a hill, now this is especially good for runners who have a little bit of anterior pelvic rotation, or they have hamstring problems, or some sort of deficiency that comes from overstriding. If you're overstriding, running up a hill, it forces your legs to land, or your feet to land right underneath your hip. In ideal running form, if you've ever had your gait analyzed on a treadmill, if we were to film you in slow motion, when your foot comes down and connects with the ground, that moment of impact should take place directly beneath your hips. Now, a lot of runners, especially those who heel strike, they're landing farther out, and so they're heel striking, which is like running with your emergency brake on. You are momentarily stopping yourself every single time that you run. So they're heel striking and they're landing way above their hips, whereas you want to be back here landing underneath your hips and on your midfoot and rolling off from there. So hills, they force your legs to land right underneath your hip because of the grade, because of the angle that they are. So they're great. They force you to focus on your knee drive. They make your glutes fire in the correct firing pattern. Overall, hills are something that if you just run nothing but hills alone every single day, your form will eventually, it'll work out all of its flaws because it forces your body to be as efficient as possible running up those hills. So that's the first benefit. And the second benefit, the explosivity of it, of you as an athlete, not necessarily as a runner, but hills in a way, they're almost like doing squats without weight. So organically, as you're running, getting in weight work on your legs, putting in these squats that really, really build the explosiveness, especially hill repeats that are done faster. When you're recruiting those fast twitch fibers and firing hard to run up that hill and propel yourself forward, that can go a long way towards developing your top end speed that you will need late in the race. Okay, so the second question was what grade and what distance for a hill? This depends on the kind of workout that you're doing, but my suggestion for hill repeats is I like to do them the same way that I do strides, which is at the end of an easy run. For doing strides out here, I live somewhere flat. I would head out and I would do 25 seconds worth of back and forth on the flat, just doing accelerated sprinting for 25 seconds, resting for a minute, getting my heart rate down, and heading back the other way. So kind of doing the same thing, but on hills, where I would start at the bottom of a hill and I will sprint up. I'm not necessarily concerned with the length of the hill, but I'd say about 100 to 150 meters is good. And I would go 25 seconds, and I would maybe do this 6 times. I'd go 25 seconds fairly aggressively at what feels like maybe mile or 3K race pace. Okay, so faster than 5K pace for the first rep. I'd go up 25 seconds and I would kind of mark where I hit, and then I'd jog back down to the bottom where I started. And then I'd go up 25 seconds again, but with the goal being to get a little bit farther than I did the time before. So if I'm starting at just faster than 5K pace and I'm finishing all out by the 6th one, I like to see that I've gone several meters farther than I started. And this also increases that explosivity. And as you're adding lactic acid to your legs from charging up this hill, it's teaching your legs how to turn over and how to run fast when they're starting to get heavy and tired, which is another very useful tool. So in terms of what grade, I don't like to use anything above, I'd say for me, 4 to 5% is perfect. Anything above 6, 7, 8%, and I think it almost defeats the purpose because you can't run fast enough to be explosive on those hills. I'll give an example for there's a race up in North Carolina where I train called the Bear, and this race is a 5-mile race that is entirely uphill. I think the record on it is over 8-minute pace per mile. But it's interesting. I watched it this year, and the final finishing stretch is at about a 12% grade. And so you see people kicking, but they're still running about 10-minute pace because that's as fast as they can run up this hill. So I think that a perfect grade is about 4 to 5% grade where you can still reap the form benefits of the hill, but you're able to run fast enough because it's not super steep. Some people prefer a higher grade. That can be up to you, but I think you'll know when it's too steep. If it's just ridiculous how slow you have to run to get up it, then that's probably a little too steep. Okay, so what pace for the workout? As I said, I think it's better in workouts like that to start a little slower and to finish faster. And then how many repeats per workout and how frequently should a hill repeat be done? I think 6 to 8 repeats if you're just doing this at following an easy run is great. I know that Runners Connect users, they see in their training hill repeats, and then they'll go into a tempo run after. So they'll start with hill repeats and they'll transition into a tempo run workout. So if you're doing something like that, obviously that's going to change. Or if you're doing something like a long sustained climb, which my coach is a huge fan of. He does these long sustained climbs for maybe 4 or 5 miles where I'm running at a very, very steady rhythm of, what feels like a 10K to half marathon effort, and I'm charging up these hills for a long time. So obviously, it depends on what workout you're doing. Hills can be utilized for any different number of workouts. I think it's good, even if you're on a treadmill, if you have a workout like a tempo run, to alternate the pace every now and or alternate the incline every now and then to give yourself, oh, now I'm at 0% for a minute. Now I'm at 2% grade for a minute. Now I'm at 1, and then even go downhill a bit. I think it's a good way to keep your legs used to hills. And also, running a marathon like Chicago, one that is totally and completely flat, is a totally different animal than running a race that has hills where you need to be able to change, your body needs to be able to change gears going up these here, kind of shifting into a lower grade, the same way that a bicycle does. You're taking shorter steps and you're increasing your cadence so that way you can make it to the top of the hill. So I think it's important that you practice that. Okay, and they say, how frequently should a hill repeat workout be done? I think you should be hitting hills in a somewhat aggressive manner, maybe once a week. It's not something that you need to target every other day. If you're doing something like hill repeats or like hill strides at the end of a run that I mentioned, that's a great thing to do once a week to add into your running. No matter where you're at in your training cycle, you might have just finished a marathon and you have all winter of aerobic based running, but in that time, I think it's important to stay in touch with all of your gears, especially that explosive fast twitch gear that comes from hill repeats. Okay, so the next question we have today is, I'm training for a half marathon this weekend, and I am thinking about training for my first marathon next year. My question is, during the winter, do I keep cycling through the same workouts, or do I just do aerobic conditioning until 16 weeks out? This is an interesting question, especially as it follows on the heels of the last question in terms of staying in touch with your fast twitch fibers. One thing that I see a lot of runners do, and it's a huge mistake, is that they refuse to take an appropriate amount of downtime after a marathon. Now, this person's running a half marathon, and that's slightly different, but if you've had a big buildup, if you've been training for months, it is very important that every now and then you let your body reset, which means taking 5 to 10 days completely off and then aerobic running for a while. Now, during this time of aerobic running, I just want to add a little premise to it, and that is that I will still be doing, when I enter back into my aerobic phase after this break, I will still be doing something like that, hill sprints or strides, once or twice a week for the first couple weeks to keep in touch with that top end speed gear. It's really important because it's kind of a use it or lose it situation with that top speed. You have to be able to recruit those muscle fibers, otherwise eventually they atrophy. So in terms of what do you want to do during the winter if you're training for a marathon next year? Well, it depends on what you're doing. Yeah, and 16 weeks out before the marathon is a good time to start marathon specific work. But my best suggestion is this. Let's say you want to run your first marathon next fall. That doesn't mean you want to be doing nothing but aerobic work between now and summertime. No, I think a really good thing that you can do is if you choose a marathon that's 6 months or more in the future, it's important that you spend some time targeting shorter races. That will actually make you stronger in the long run towards training for that marathon. So kind of view your year as having 2 distinct seasons, a spring season and a fall season. That's what most professional runners do, is they have a spring track or road racing season and then usually a fall road or marathon season. And after each of those seasons, they will take significant downtime. There's one professional runner, Bernard Lagat, who multi-time US champion, medaled at the World Championships. He would take up to a month completely off after a season, and he was not a marathoner. He would run nothing but 1,500, 3K, and occasionally 5K races, and yet he would still take a full month off because he understood the demands that training placed on his body. Now, that's something that too many runners don't understand. They're eager to jump back into racing, and it's very tempting to say, oh, I just ran this great marathon and I'm fit and I really, really want to, see what else I have in the tank. But you know what? Your body has been going for so long that it will just go up this hill and it will crash if you don't give it the proper time to rest. We have a comment here. It says, I ran my second marathon in Chicago this past weekend. I have the hot chocolate, and I'm assuming that's a race, in about a month. I trained for 6 months for this one. This week I did walking and a light run this morning. Is that too soon? No, actually, Ella, that's about perfect. If you had Chicago this past weekend, for me personally, I like to take about 10 days off, but this, and it also depends how Chicago went for you. For me, Chicago it was an effort where I didn't feel too sore afterwards. Unlike last year, I couldn't hardly walk for the first week. So if you're feeling good and you're feeling like, you know what, okay, I've taken a full 3 or 4 days off, that's okay. A light run is good. It will actually help with recovery. But my suggestion for the 15K in a month is that you have to also realize Chicago was not just a race for you. It was also the biggest and hardest workout that you had this season. So it's this workout that's also going to boost your fitness. But there is this rule of thumb that states that for each mile of the race that you run, that is how many days it takes to recover from that race. For instance, a race like a marathon, if there's 26 miles, it's going to take you almost exactly 4 weeks to recover from it. So it says you have the hot chocolate 15K in a month. Honestly, Ella, I believe that you would, if I was coaching you, I would say you should probably run in 2.5 to 3 weeks, 1 or 2 workouts, but workouts that are not going to rip you apart, workouts that are just going to fine tune your speed over 15K specific workouts, like maybe 6 by a K at your 15K pace. And then I would have you go ahead and jump in, because Chicago is going to be also, I think that fitness will carry you through to this 15K. You often see this, I've talked about this a few times on the coach chat, but we will often see even professional runners, it's possible to do this, is that they'll run a marathon and then 4 weeks later they'll run another one and have a massive PR because they're riding the fitness from the first marathon. But generally that's when something goes wrong at the first one, and that's always when they're willing to take rest after the second one. It's very rare that you see someone piggybacking back to back to back races. Okay, so Mike Sheridan says, interesting, I've been running 5K, 5 mile, 10K since my August marathon, 2 weeks off with a final half marathon in November, then 2 weeks off and get ready for spring marathon training. Right, yeah, so in someone like Mike's case, Mike tends to be someone who really thrives off of racing as well. He uses races as workouts, which is, that is fantastic. And for people who are able to do that, for me personally, I tend to not want to line up at a race unless I know I'm ready to completely bust open a PR and I'm ready to go. It'd be very nerve-wracking for me to line up in a race after a month of no workouts. But for those people who want to use races to get their way back into shape, that's totally fine. Just make sure you're taking your time off after the marathon, letting your body reset. And again, kind of with easy running, your body will tell you when it's ready to start running again. After this spring, I didn't run a marathon, but I had all these shorter races. And when I was ready to take my downtime, 10 days of no running, it took me 8.5 days to even remotely miss running, to even want to run again. So sometimes mentally more than physically you need a break. But right now I've had 4 days off and I am dying to get back out there. So it can change from cycle to cycle as well. You know your body. And again, this is your own running fingerprint. You're different than anybody else. Okay, let's see. I have a message from Deborah asking me to personal message her about something, and I will do that, Deborah. All right, so, and yes, my answer is yes for you on that, by the way. Okay, so let's see here. All right, we have a question here that's a bit interesting. I'm gonna have to sort through it. It says a bit about my background. I'm 46 years old and have been running seriously for the past year. So this person is just starting out. I am currently training for a half marathon with a target time of between 2:05 and 2:10, and hopefully I eventually want to dip below 2 hours. That's an awesome goal. At my age, stated maximum heart rate is around 178 beats per minute. Is it safe for me to run at 170 to 180 beats per minute throughout my workout, an hour and a half in duration? Even running this maximum heart rate, I still feel okay though. Yes, it is 100% okay for you to train at that heart rate. I'm just gonna say it, and I think that most coaches in the country would agree with me on this. Heart rate and heart rate max is sometimes, it's just absolute baloney. It's one of those things that I would not ever recommend that an athlete get their max heart rate tested, simply because it is a limitation that athletes put on themselves unnecessarily. Heart rate can be changed by about 1 million different factors when you head out for a run. There are days that you may be out there for an easy pace and it says your heart rate max based on, you know, your stated, it is complete baloney. I would say don't, and I think that the other coaches at Runners Connect, we put out an article. We do not recommend training by heart rate. Do not wear a heart rate monitor. We do not recommend using that as a determinant of how fast or slow you should be running. Because people, for their heart rates, they are all across the board. So to take all those people, multiply it, divide it, and take the mean and say, okay, this is your number, is completely erroneous. To be on one side or other of the scale is so common. And also with all these factors, sleep, alcohol consumption, dehydration, mileage, those are just a few of the factors that can really change your heart rate. It can be huge fluctuations from day to day. As long as you feel comfortable, you say you still feel fine running at this maximum heart rate, you're absolutely fine. My guess is that your max is an awful lot higher than that. So in terms of taking your max heart rate, it's difficult to do, but I think that's one of the other things that hill repeats can be useful for. If you take a 20-second steep 20-second hill, and you run up it 8 times, at the end of the 8th one, stop right at the top and grab your heart rate. That's going to be fairly close to your actual max. Not that should determine your running pace. Listening to your body really shouldn't have much to do with the number of times that your heart is beating per minute. Unless obviously you're having palpitations, or like something is off with your heart, or you have a condition. Even for myself, and this is somewhat common, I guess, among elite athletes, but I have something called abnormal sinus bradycardia, which means that my heart, it beats much faster when I'm breathing in than when I'm breathing out. It slows way, way, way down. So, and that is actually the most efficient way that your heart can pump blood. And you see that among elite endurance athletes quite a bit. But so that would be saying that if I were, you know, it stopped after repeat and I just took a long gasp of breath, my heart rate would read totally differently than if I breathed out slowly. It would be just drastically off. So heart rate is one of those things that we do not recommend training by heart rate. I understand the question, especially for this person who's been running a year. It can be tempting to read one article and to buy in completely, saying, okay, well, this is how I'm supposed to train, so I'm just going to look at my heart rate and stay between in that zone. So no, that's completely, I don't buy into it. So I hope that helps. Okay. All right. So the last question we have for today is, it's a pretty long one, and I'm not exactly, I got to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what the injury is here, but they said, I've been in physical therapy for a year on and off about FAI impingement. It's a relief that I can avoid surgery. I'm doing a lot of recovery and strength work, but I feel like I'm cheating by not having a full running schedule. Now that I'm not injured, I've been able to drop 1 minute and 20 seconds for my 5K speed and 25 seconds for my mile. So it's clearly working. However, I'm only running a couple of miles a week, and I feel like I should be able to push my body more than I can. I keep wanting to put on more mileage. When I can push myself, things go wrong and I'm back to hurting. Last week, I had to take a few days off after a short setback, and I knew why I'd done it. But when I was able to get back to the gym, I had a little conversation with myself about why I wasn't actually lazy this week. I know logically why having this particular set of workouts works, but I could use some coaching and advice here. 5Ks and shorter races are my thing, so it's not like I'm being prevented from running that dream marathon. I'm progressing well, even though I don't have a lot of cardio work. I should love this. It's just that I look at my schedule, and some days I feel like I'm a slacker when I know that I'm just following my physical therapist's medical advice, spending time recovering properly, and listening to my body. What do you tell your runners who are in similar situations? I've had plenty of runners in similar situations where you have to follow a plan. And I will say this, to me, I would much prefer to coach someone like you, someone who is frustrated when they have a lack of work, versus someone who is frustrated with the amount of work that they have, meaning you're someone who a coach would need to rein back rather than push harder. And that's a wonderful thing. That makes you an athlete. But it's also about trying to shift your viewpoint from seeing rest as the enemy. There are times when your body is trying to truly fully heal itself. There are times when rest is a part of your training. It's not the absence of training. Rest is a part of your training. And if I were you, what I would do is I would write that down and I would post it somewhere where you can see it every single day. Say rest is a part of my training, not the absence of training, because you can't train if you're going to push through rest and you're going to continue to injure yourself over and over and over. It's a cycle that you have to break out of. And the only way to break out of that is by doing actual rest. So listening to your physical therapist, but also I will say this, there have been plenty of times that athletes have come to me and said, you know what, my physical therapist tells me I can't run for a month. And I say, you know what, I want you to get a second opinion. Go back and see someone who works with runners or someone who is a runner themselves. Because so many times people go back for a second opinion and the advice is, oh yeah, absolutely, you can train through this. Just make sure that you're foam rolling, icing, doing all these little things. So if you are truly unhappy and you feel, if your body truly feels that it can be doing more, then I would go get a second opinion. I would talk to someone who specifically works with runners in order to get yourself back on track. I mean, I feel for you. I know that this situation is absolutely terrible. I have a teammate who's an incredible runner. He made the world cross country team for the USA this year. And he has been in the pool for the last 8 weeks. And it's been a nightmare. During a race, his planner, the entire thing, it ruptured, it split into 2 pieces, and he has no planner anymore. And so he has been just really struggling, mostly mentally and emotionally, because us as runners, we tend to say my self-worth is how good I am right now as a runner. If I'm in PR shape, I am a great person, I'm doing awesome. Maybe not even on a conscious level, but a lot of us tend to identify ourselves so much with running that when it's taken away from us, we lose our self-worth. Or like you said, we feel lazy, and you keep having to tell yourself why you're not actually lazy. So the key for you is going to be shifting your viewpoint from seeing rest as the absence of training to seeing it as not only a part of your training, but it's an asset, because it's going to get you out there. Deborah, who's watching this, she can testify to this. That girl has spent more time in the pool than anyone I've ever coached. And because of that, because she was willing to be lazy, to step away from training, to not get out there, because she listened to me and she didn't push it. She didn't get back on the road too soon. It has come full circle. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, she won her age group and set a PR in Chicago this year at 59 years young. She's incredible. So it's really about seeing this time, being able to see the big picture. Don't be stuck in the day-to-day right now. It's very easy to do. There's that common quotation of, you know, when you're injured, you feel like you're never going to get healthy again. And when you're healthy, you feel like you're never going to get injured again. So just try and step out of the situation, look at the big picture, and think about if you were talking to someone. Say I was coming to you with an injury problem and I said, you know, I just don't want to rest anymore. I feel lazy. I want to get back out there. You would be telling me, take it easy, rest. You have time. You'll come back from this, but you got to do it right. Otherwise, you're just going to end up back in the same situation again. All right, looks like we have one last comment here. Ella says, I was feeling fine until I got to mile 18 or so of Chicago, and I started to have a small pain or a stint above the right rib cage above the rib cage on the right side. It unnerved me a moment. I slowed down and let it subside. I'm not sure why. This happens a lot. Now, the interesting thing is this: a lot of people attribute cramps like this or side stitches, things like that during the marathon, to a lack of electrolytes, but often it's because during those later stages of the marathon, mile 16 to 25, when you are starting to fall apart, that once your form goes, if you start to do something different, a lot of athletes, when their form goes, their butt tends to stick out a little bit, or their pelvis rotates forward, and so the spine curves, which pulls up. And so what's happening is that inside your diaphragm is connected to your liver with this connective tissue, and as it gets pulled, you're getting a side stitch. So trying to focus on tucking back up, tucking your hips up, which will tuck your rib cage under, and breathing deeply on that side, letting it, you know, just kind of letting it go, letting that tension ease. That's what's going to relieve that side stitch. But that's fairly common. I get that every now and then. I did for Chicago, maybe about a mile or two. I felt that kind of pain set in. That's pretty common. I tend to just grab my hand, reach on in there, and kind of squeeze. Deborah and I discussed this after the race as well. She did that too. Just kind of like actually physically move things back up. Ella says that makes sense. Thanks. Yeah, it happens all the time. You imagine if your liver is shaped like a piece of pie, it's shaped like this. It has 2 connective tissues on either end of that pie that's holding it to your diaphragm, those muscles on your rib cage. So if things start to pull back and it starts to stretch, there's just a lot of tension, and that results in that side stitch. And your liver is huge. So it can range from the middle of it, left side, right side, all over. So these things happen, and it's important to know how to deal with them. So it's focusing on exhaling as you're running, just long, gentle exhale. If you have to manually physically kind of squeeze things. That's what I do, and it always tends to help. So, all right, I hope you guys enjoyed today's coach chat. As always, if you want to log on to this page while I'm not here, while I'm not live speaking to you like this, go ahead and scroll down to the bottom, and there will be a section that allows you to ask your questions. I was so grateful for about the 10 or so questions that we got this week. Please keep them coming. No question is too silly. You can ask them anonymously if you don't want your name put out there. So I enjoyed talking with you all today. If you have questions, feel free to send those over, and I will see you next week.